Some trails don't have names on any map. Some cabins don't appear on any registry. And some of the people you see out there weren't there when you looked again. Tonight, I have 3 stories, real accounts, submitted by hikers who are still trying to make sense of what happened to them. Turn off the lights, put in your headphones, and whatever you do, don't go hiking alone. Story 1 was submitted by Marcus, a 34-year-old section hiker from Portland. My name is Marcus. I've been hiking the Pacific Crest Trail in sections for 3 years. Not the whole thing at once. I have a job, a life, obligations that don't care about my need to disappear into the trees every few months. But whenever I can carve out a long weekend, I go. This particular stretch was in northern Washington state, a 40-mile section I'd been saving. The elevation gain was significant in places, and the weather in October up there is unpredictable. But I'd done harder routes in worse conditions. I wasn't worried. I started at the trailhead just before 7 a.m. on a Friday. The parking lot was empty except for a rusted pickup that looked like it had been sitting there for weeks. I didn't think much of it. Hunters leave vehicles. People break down. The world doesn't revolve around my hike. The first 6 miles were everything I needed them to be. Quiet, cool. The kind of silence that doesn't exist anywhere near a city, real silence, where the absence of noise is so complete it has its own texture. The trees were massive up there. Douglas firs so tall I had to tilt my head back to see the tops. And even then I wasn't sure I was seeing the right trees. Fog came in around noon. Not unusual for that region. It settled low between the trees and turned the forest into something from a different century. I had my GPS, my trail markers, my map. I wasn't lost. I was just inside the fog. It started with sounds I couldn't place. I've spent enough time in forests to know what belongs there. Squirrels, ravens, the creak of branches. Wind moving through pine needles sounds almost exactly like water. And for a long time I thought I was near a stream. Then I realized the sound was moving with me. I stopped. The sound stopped. I told myself it was the fog playing tricks. Sound behaves strangely in heavy moisture. It bends, it echoes, it creates phantom sources. I've heard my own footsteps come back to me from the wrong direction in thick fog before. I kept walking. Around mile 8, I noticed the trail markers had changed. Not the official PCT blazes, those were still there, but something else. Small stacks of stones arranged in pairs along the side of the trail. 4 of them spaced about 100 meters apart. Cairns aren't unusual on trails. Hikers make them constantly, but these weren't celebratory or navigational. They were placed deliberately, precisely, and they were all pointing toward something in the trees to my left. I didn't follow the direction they pointed. Not then. The cabin appeared at mile marker 9. It wasn't on any map. It was set back maybe 30 meters from the trail, barely visible through the trees and the fog. Wooden. Old, the kind of old where the wood has gone gray and the roof has developed a concave sag that means the interior is probably compromised. 1 window on the side I could see. Dark inside. I want to be clear. I almost didn't approach it. I'm not the kind of hiker who pokes around in abandoned structures. I've read enough incident reports to know that floors collapse, roofs cave, and the structural integrity of old buildings in wet climates is never what it looks like from the outside. But the door was open, not fallen off its hinges, open, deliberately open, and on the small wooden step in front of the door, there was a boot. 1 boot, laced up, right foot, size that looked like a men's 10 or 11. There was no left boot. There was no person. There was just the 1 boot, sitting upright and laced like someone had paused to take it off and never came back for it. I took pictures. I'm not sure why, some instinct. Then I called out, "Hello, is someone in there?" The words felt ridiculous even as I said them, absorbed by the fog and the trees and the silence. Nothing responded. I didn't go inside. I walked away. I told myself it was nothing. An eccentric hiker, a practical joke, someone who lost a boot 3 years ago. I made camp 2 miles further on. At 2 a.m., I woke up because something was outside my tent, not an animal. I've camped through bears and raccoons and deer. Animals are curious but clumsy. Whatever was outside my tent was still, completely, deliberately still. I could hear breathing that wasn't mine. I lay in my sleeping bag and didn't move for a very long time. The breathing wasn't matching any human rhythm I'd ever heard, too slow, too measured, with pauses between exhales that lasted just a beat too long. Then, slowly, the breathing moved around the tent, from the left side to the foot of the tent to the right side. Slow, methodical, like something checking the perimeter. My hand was on my bear spray. My headlamp was in my other hand. I didn't turn it on because some part of me understood, on a level below conscious thought, that I didn't want to see what was outside. After maybe 10 minutes, the sound moved away, toward the tree line, gone. In the morning, I broke camp at first light and hiked the remaining miles to the exit trailhead in under 4 hours. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. When I got to my car, I checked my boots before getting in. Force of habit shaking out insects, checking for mud. In my left boot, tucked into the toe, was a small flat stone. Dark gray, smooth, the same kind of stone that had been used to make those cairns. I have no explanation for how it got there. My boot had been inside my tent all night. The next story happened at over 12,000 feet, where visibility dropped to nothing, and something was waiting in the fog. Story 2. This story comes from Dana, a trail runner from Denver, Colorado. My name is Dana. I'm a trail runner. Have been for almost 8 years, which means I've covered a lot of ground in conditions most people would consider inadvisable. Early mornings, remote routes, solo. I know the risks and I manage them. Satellite communicator, hydration, leaving a detailed itinerary with 2 people who know to call for help if they don't hear from me. The route I was running that September was a loop I'd done before. 14 miles at altitude, between 11 and 13,000 feet, with a 3-mile section that cuts across an exposed ridgeline before dropping back into the tree line. I'd run it in June without issue. The September conditions were supposed to be similar. They weren't. The fog came in fast, the way it does at elevation, not the slow maritime drift of the Pacific Northwest, but a sudden suffocation. I was at the ridgeline when it happened, and within 10 minutes visibility had dropped to maybe 15 feet. I slowed to a walk. I had my GPS. I wasn't concerned, just cautious. I saw the figure for the first time about 40 minutes into the fog. Just a shape, darker than the gray-white of the fog, roughly human in outline, standing still, maybe 25 feet ahead of me on the trail. I assumed it was another hiker. Visibility being what it was, I was relieved to see another person. I slowed and called out, "Hey, how are the conditions ahead?" The figure didn't respond, didn't move. I took a few steps closer. The fog shifted the way it does, and the figure was gone. I stood where it had been. There was nothing there. No footprints in the soft earth beside the trail. No disturb the vegetation. I'm a rational person. I attributed it to the fog and kept moving. I saw it again 20 minutes later. Same thing, a dark shape in the fog ahead, stationary, roughly human. This time I didn't call out. I slowed my pace and watched. It was standing slightly off the trail, in the direction of a steep drop-off I knew was on the eastern edge of the ridge. Just standing there. Head, if it was a head, tilted slightly, like it was listening. I stopped walking. It didn't move. I took one step off the trail to my left, away from it. The figure turned, toward me. I could not see a face. I could not see details. But the orientation changed, and something about the way it moved was wrong. Not wrong like a human moving strangely. Wrong like something that understood the shape of how humans move without being one. I ran. I'm a trail runner. I ran. The fog started to lift as I descended off the ridgeline. By the time I hit the tree line, I could see 50 feet, then 100. I slowed, checked my GPS, confirmed I was en route. My heart rate was way above what the terrain justified. I looked back up toward the ridge. The figure was there, at the tree line, still, watching. In the clearer air, I could see details I hadn't been able to see in the fog. It was wearing dark clothing. It was taller than it should have been, standing at the edge of the slope in a way that suggested it wasn't standing on the same ground level I was. Or it was simply very, very tall. It didn't follow me into the trees. It just stood there until I couldn't see it anymore. I finished the loop and got back to my car in good time. I filed a report with the ranger station. Not because I knew what to say, but because I thought I should say something. The ranger I spoke to was professional and neutral. She wrote things down. She said they'd look into it. She also said, almost as an aside, that there had been 3 other reports from that ridgeline over the past 18 months. Hikers reporting a figure in the fog. All solo. All in low visibility conditions. She didn't offer an explanation. I didn't ask for one. Some questions are better left alone. This last story is different, because whatever was following him never actually stepped on the trail. Story 3. Third story was sent by Caleb, a 29-year-old from Roanoke, Virginia. My name is Caleb. I've section hiked the Appalachian Trail for 6 years. If you know the it's a social trail shelters every 8 to 10 miles, a culture of trail names and shared meals and comparing blisters. Loneliness isn't really the problem. If anything, there are times when you hike for miles trying to get ahead of a noisy group just to be alone with the trees for an hour. The Virginia section I was on last April is considered one of the quieter stretches. Less foot traffic than the southern states, none of the prestige of the northern terminus sections. Most serious thru hikers move through it quickly. Weekenders and section hikers like me are spread out enough that you might go half a day without seeing another soul. I was 4 days into a 6-day stretch. Tired in the good way, legs heavy, appetite enormous, sleeping like a stone every night. I'd seen almost no one for 2 days. The forecast was clear. I had one of those rare stretches where everything is calibrated correctly, the pack weight, the daily mileage, the mental state. I was completely content. It started as a sound. Footsteps behind me, not unusual on a trail. I didn't think anything of it. I moved slightly to the right to make room and kept my pace, expecting whoever it was to pass me or call out a greeting from behind. Neither happened. I walked for another 10 minutes. The footsteps stayed exactly the same distance behind me. Not gaining, not falling back, just keeping pace. I stopped abruptly. The footsteps stopped at almost the same moment, maybe half a second after mine, which is the sound lag you'd expect from someone who wasn't anticipating the stop. I turned around. The trail was empty as far as I could see. I started paying attention in a way I hadn't been. Every time I stopped for water or to check my map, I listened. Silence. Every time I started walking again, within 30 seconds, the footsteps returned. The thing that made it worse was the consistency. It wasn't the random sound scatter of a forest. It wasn't the echo of my own gait. It was deliberate pacing, a human-length stride, 2 feet, moving at exactly my speed. I tried an experiment. I slowed down abruptly, not stopping, just cutting my pace nearly in half. The footsteps slowed with me. I sped up, almost jogging. They sped up. Whatever was behind me was matching my pace intentionally. I had cell signal rare on the but I was near a ridgeline. I called my wife. I told her it was just to check in. I didn't want to explain what was happening to me. What would I even say? Hey, something is following me through the woods and matching my exact pace. She would have told me to call a ranger. Maybe I should have. Instead, I just talked, Caleb checking in, the sound of another voice, even through a phone. The footsteps continued behind me the entire time I was on the call. The shelter was 3 miles ahead. I focused on that. About a mile out from the shelter, the trail crosses a small wooden bridge over a creek. I'd been on this section before and I knew it was there. As I stepped onto the bridge, the wood hollow and loud under my boots, I heard something that I have not been able to explain in the year since it happened. The footsteps behind me didn't cross the bridge. They stopped at the bank. I could hear them stop. I walked across my own footsteps loud on the planks, and on the other side I turned around. The far bank was empty. The trail was empty. The trees on either side were still. And then, from somewhere in the woods to the left of the trail, well off the path and into the thick brush where no trail ran, the footsteps started again, moving parallel to me, toward the shelter. I made it to the shelter. 2 other hikers were there, a couple from Maryland, friendly, completely normal. I set up my tent nearby instead of using the shelter itself, which I rarely do. Old habit. But that night, I wanted walls around me, even thin ones. I didn't hear the footsteps again that night, or the next morning, or for the remaining 2 days of my hike. But here's the thing I keep coming back to. When I got home and uploaded my photos from the trip, I found one I didn't remember taking. My phone, not my camera. A photo taken at 11:47 p.m. on the night I arrived at the shelter. It shows the trail through the trees, dark, flash illuminated, my own tent visible at the edge of the frame, and at the far edge of the flash's reach, just barely within the light, something standing upright between 2 trees. I've looked at it 100 times. I don't know what it is. I didn't take that photo. My phone was in my tent. 3 trails, 3 experiences that don't have clean endings. That's the thing about the wilderness, it doesn't owe you closure. It doesn't care whether you understand what you saw. You go in and you come out, and sometimes what comes out with you is something you can't name. If you've had an experience like these, something you've never been able to explain, leave it in the comments. I read every one. And if tonight's stories got under your skin, subscribe. New horror every week. We'll be here, in the dark, waiting. And next time, it might not just be a story. Fade out, ambient forest sounds return slowly, then silence.